from the Digital Media Center on the campus of Southern Oregon University in Ashland, Oregon. This is Ramping Up Your English, an educational program for intermediate level English language learners. Here's your host for Ramping Up Your English, John Letts.
Welcome to Ramping Up Your English, a program for intermediate language learners. Now, horses don't talk, but we're featuring horses today on this program, episode 33. Ramping Up Your English is for people from all language backgrounds and all ages. And we do thematic units in this program for content-based ESL, English as a second language. And our theme now is horses. Boy, I'm getting the flies. You see, horses have to deal with flies. And Doxy here is trying to get rid of these flies flying around her eyes, and boy, I don't blame her. So, most people know something about animals, and people have their own ideas of their favorite animals. But I think everyone would agree that horses are one of the most magnificent animals on earth. So welcome again to Ramping Up Your English.
Horses have a grace and a beauty that's hard to describe in any language. So we start our theme of animals with these horses. My director Denise Ross and her daughter Michelle treated their horses to a ride and treated us to some great video of horses. We see Doxy first and then Cowboy.
Here comes Cowboy.
Now, you don't usually just jump up on a horse and ride. There are some steps to take, and a good place to start is grooming.
You think they look forward to that?
She does. She loves it. When you start grooming her, she's just...
Denise and Michelle are using brushes to groom the fur, what we call the coat, of Doxy and Cowboy. I suppose that to the horses it's like getting a massage. They certainly seem to enjoy it.
Let me zoom in on this horse smile.
Oh, he's so funny. Our Mr. Cowboy, you loving that, aren't you? But God, don't stop now. This is a curry comb. This is used, especially in the springtime when they're shedding, and you can come through and just take off big things of hair when they're shedding. And you can just see how much more it takes off. And then this is just a regular brush. So with our horses,
That's called the mane that you're brushing, right?
want to be either very close to it or a distance, long distance away.
And that part between the ears up on the forehead, that's called the furlock?
Yep.
All right.
It's like a regular hair comb, and this is for their tail and their mane.
Oh, okay.
So if you
what
really want to
the
get
mane?
the snarls out, yeah, not sure if you like that or not. And this is where then they can get it nice and smooth, and they can braid their manes, they can braid their tails, but this helps get the snarls out. Okay, and this is just another type of a brush, plastic, and hold it with your hand like this, and just go. So there's many different types of brushes and different varieties, different price range. But you can see what it gets off.
Okay.
And then this is always a good one. It's called mane and tail. And this is to give them their baths, or get them all cleaned up and shiny. And then this one is just a saddle soap. So this will be for the bridles, for your saddles, to get those all nice and bright and shiny and stuff. And then the regular one that we just don't have with us right now is just good old saddle soap. You know, that it comes in the can to rub, the cream saddle soap, and that works. So you can see here how her foot is positioned.
Okay.
That means she's very, very comfortable. She's at ease.
Wherever the ears are pointing is where they're paying attention.
Oh,
So
okay.
right now he's kind of focused. They're kind of turned back towards me. He knows I'm back here and brushing him. Whereas if they're forward, they're obviously focused on something in front of them. If they're pinned to the back, they're super angry and stressed out and nervous.
That's when you have to watch, be careful, is when those ears are pinned back, you've got 1,200 pounds of anger. Get out of the way. So here's the pick. Watch Michelle clean the horse's feet out. And see how she goes down?
Mm-hmm.
That's so that the horse will lift up its foot and get cleaned out.
Oh.
And you should clean
That's a
your
matter of
horse's-
training?
You should clean your horse's feet before you ride every time.
Every
That's for sure.
time,
And afterwards,
okay.
yeah, that's one thing you should always do.
Start with the saddle blanket. It protects the horse from getting pinched by the leather. Here comes the heavy leather. Adjust and make sure it's not pinching his back. Got 2 pieces. Front and the back of the stomach. Reach underneath. Usually wraps around a couple times. It's a cute little bow knot to keep it safe. And this part stays looser than the front.
Now we're saddled up and ready to ride. We'll return to the ranch in a few minutes, but first it's back to the studio for some language instruction.
Well, I might have to come out and visit Doxy once in a while. We kind of have a Welcome again to Ramping Up Your English. I'm John Letts, and this is segment 2 of episode 33, and it's our first episode in our new unit, which is animals. So welcome back into the studio. We'll be taking some more time out on the ranch a little bit later in this program, and into a second program that we'll be doing on horses. Well, I wanted to tell you that in the segment we just watched, we got to see a series of things happening, and that's what we call a sequence. Well, what we'll do today is we'll use this opportunity of getting a horse ready to ride, getting them all saddled up. We'll use that as an opportunity to practice and ramp up our sequencing skills today. So at the early intermediate level, what we learn to do is to take important steps and put them in order, and then use some very important sequencing words between each step. Now, we often begin our sequence with the word first. It clues our listener or reader that we're about to list some steps in order. So here we see, first we groom the horse. Now, we use the word next to indicate a step that follows. Next, we clean the horse's feet. We use the sequencing word then to indicate the step that follows the previous one. Then we put on the saddle blanket. Now, when we reach the last step, we use the sequencing word finally. So as you can see here, finally, we put the saddle on and tighten it. Now, we've gone beyond the beginning steps by being able to sequence these events and use these important words. Now we can ramp things up even further by using the words before and after.
So rather than using the same pattern as before, we use the word before to put the steps in order in a new way. So here's how we wrote it this time. Before riding a horse, we get the horse prepared. We begin by grooming the horse. Now you notice this does us part of a sequence, but it's not the same kind of predictable sequence we've done before. So that makes it a little bit more advanced than what we've done before. Now, we use the word after to indicate which step comes next. So after grooming the horse, we carefully clean its hooves. Now, we can use the words prior to in the same way we use the word before. Prior to putting on the saddle, we cover the horse's back with the saddle blanket. Now, we can use the word after to complete the sequence as well. After completing the previous steps, now we're ready to lay the saddle on the horse. Now, both examples are correct. There's no problem with either one of them. But the second example is indicative of a higher level of English proficiency. It could be either the intermediate or even the high intermediate level of English. So it's ramped up quite a bit from the basic level. So there's more than one way to write a sequence, just like it's more than one way to ride a horse. We'll learn more about that when we return right after this.
Is it true that ramping up your English is going to the dogs?
Brandy.
Yes, it is. And cats, horses, rabbits, geese, jaguars, and more. Join us in our new unit on animals. Ramping Up Your English is for intermediate English learners from all language backgrounds and all ages. We take a content-based approach to helping you reach higher levels of English proficiency. Our new thematic unit is Animals. This science unit helps viewers advance in language functions that will stretch their English skills and learn a few things from dogs as well.
Openness, trust, faithfulness, loyalty, playfulness, and more. The qualities that we as humans really do need to learn and to have in our lives on a daily basis because they deliver such beautiful rewards.
Ramping Up Your English can be seen on the Ashland Home Network on channels 15 and 115. It's on channel 182 on Charter Cable in the rest of Southern Oregon. Join us for better English and a grand time with animals.
Welcome back to Ramping Up Your English. Well, we got to practice some sequencing skills just a moment ago, and those sequencing skills had to do with getting a horse ready to ride by putting on the saddle. Now, as you know, if you were a member of the posse and you had to go after the bank robber, you probably wouldn't take time to groom your horse, okay? But this is a sequence of events that's a good thing to do before riding a horse. Now, the action, the horse is all saddled up. There's a reason for that. So to see more and learn more about horses, let's go back to the ranch and learn more about horses.
In our last presentation on horses, we saddled up and got ready to ride. Now we watch Michelle ride a horse named Cowboy. We brought his pal Doxy along to save her from the emotional stress of being left behind. Cowboy is wearing a reminder that he's an award-winning horse, and he's being ridden today by Michelle, who won state awards for an event called steer dobbing. No such pressure today. This is a pleasure ride. Michelle and Cowboy will demonstrate the various speeds or gaits of a horse. After a bit of a warm-up, the first gait or speed that was demonstrated was simply walking the horse. It's hard to believe today, but in the past, horses were considered very important as a part of our transportation system. We had Michelle demonstrate each gait or speed twice around the arena. Now she kicks it up into a slightly faster pace. This is the trot, or trotting. Trotting can cause the rider to bounce up and down in the saddle. From this angle, you can clearly see the bounce I'm talking about. Now here's a little surprise. She makes the horse go backward. She stops here and then has the horse go backward. No video trick here. The horse is walking backward. Now Michelle goes into a lope, also called a canter.
Here we go. The gallop's going to be really fast.
The lope or canter is considered by many the most smooth part of a horseback ride. Also by many is considered the most graceful. Even Doxy seems to enjoy watching the action.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Let's see what's going to happen here. Michelle's getting Cowboy to walk backward.
Tell me if my angle's on.
Good, it's good.
So here she's going straight back. And next she'll demonstrate having the horse walk backward, but this time at an angle.
Is this a good angle? Tell me if my angle's on.
Good, it's good.
Now she ramps up the speed by going into a gallop. Now Michelle and Cowboy slow down into some slower gaits. So we had several gaits that we looked at here, several speeds, everything from walking to trotting to loping to gallop, which is kind of full force speed. Different riders have different preferences when it comes to a horse's gait. Some like the calm of a walking horse, but others love the gallop with the wind in their ears, or the grace of a lope or canter. Either way, may you ride like the wind.
Well, glad we got to share some of the excitement of horseback riding. Want to tell you a little bit of a review on those speeds, which are called gaits with a horse. Now, kind of interesting on a ranch, in a sense, you have more than one kind of gate. You have a GAT gate. It's part of a fence that opens and closes. And then GAIT, the gait of a horse, or the speed of a horse, the way that they move. So those ways of moving, we had walking, trotting, loping, and gallop. And you know, we could use these words not only for horse movements, but you know, pretty much for any kind of description where you're trying to describe the way that something is moving or someone is moving. You could say, for example, my child galloped across the room. Well, that brings into the mind that horse going very fast, and you know that the child wasn't just kind of meandering across the room. They were really going with some speed, right? So walk, trot, canter is another word for lope, and gallop. So we will have some more information on horses and a little bit of vocabulary and a few other things thrown in to help ramp up your English. But right now we're going to take a break. We'll be right back after this.
What's a horse doing on ramping up your English? We're galloping toward a new unit, animals. So we're in the country meeting some horses. Horses are just one of the many animals that will help viewers ramp up their English.
So funny. Our Mr. Cowboy, you loving that?
Horses, boy, I'm getting the flies. You see, horses have to deal with flies.
Coming soon to RVTV Voices, a new unit on ramping up your English, an educational support program for intermediate level English learners from all language backgrounds. So how can horses help you improve your English? Watch Ramping Up Your English to find out on channels 15 and 115 in Ashland and channel 182 on Charter Cable in Southern Oregon.
Welcome back to Ramping Up Your English, a program for intermediate level English learners. Now, we've started our new unit on animals, and of course today, when you start a new unit like today, we want to spend a lot of time with the content of the unit. And we'll have lots of time during this unit to teach you various things like grammar and vocabulary, but there's no reason we can't kind of start today. Now, before I launch into more specifics about horses, I want to let you know that you can visit my website at letscreate.org. Now, on my website, what you'll see is you'll be able to watch this entire program as you saw it today, which is a good thing to do, to be able to remind yourself of it. You can also see some support materials on there, like I'm going to include some vocabulary that has to do with horses. I'm going to include this whole thing about sequencing that I did before. All of that is going to be on the website. That's letscreate.org. Now, another opportunity is you can go to a website called archive.org/details/rogue-tv. Now there, you not only can watch the program I did today, which is episode 33 of Ramping Up Your English, you can also download it, so you can have your own copy of it right there in your home. That's archive.org/details/rogue-tv. Now, if you're watching this, you're probably watching it either on channel 15 or 115 on the Ashland Home Network, or in other parts of Southern Oregon on Charter Cable, it's channel 182. If you're watching it in other areas, the times as well as the channels may be different. So just check with your local access or your local education channel. So let's look a little bit at some of the vocabulary, and specifically I want to go into idioms. Idiom is a saying that it's kind of the richness of language, which is why it's considered ramping up your level of English. Okay, so with horses, one of those sayings is horsing around. So you might say, see someone come into a room and say, hey, you guys stop horsing around. So horsing around simply means that you're off task. You're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. Probably doing something playful, something fun, and so, but you're supposed to be doing something else, and so someone will say, hey, stop horsing around. Well, that's what they mean. Now, another one is horseplay. It has a little bit different connotation. Horseplay is to play really rough. So if you see someone walk into a room and the kids are throwing the pillows around and jumping up on the table, they might say, hey, this is not a place to do horseplay, okay? So kind of get the idea horseplay is kind of a rough play, all right? Now there's some more idioms on my chart here, and one of them is a saying, put the cart before the horse, which simply means to do something out of sequence. So if somebody wants to put their socks on after they put their shoes on, for example, a real obvious one, you'd say, wait a minute, you're putting the cart before the horse. In other words, let's do these things in order. So horses have some interesting, I think they have some more too. Well, if you hear someone say, oh, she has really good horse sense, that means common sense. In other words, practical kind of smarts, okay? And bucking the system. Bucking is when a horse is trying to get the rider to fall off of it, okay? So when a horse bucks, it's trying to get you out of that saddle and on the ground. Something you don't really want to happen, okay? So bucking the system could mean, for example, okay, there's a system in place, maybe it's where you work, maybe it's where you live. You're not cooperating with it. You're going in the opposite direction, so you're bucking the system. So that's the last idiom we'll talk about today that has to do with horses. Now, like I said, I'll have some vocabulary on my website, letscreate.org. That could include things like those gaits of the horse. Remember, there were some parts of the horse that we talked about, like the mane and the tail and the furlock. So you'll see some of that vocabulary as well. When you start a new unit, it is important to get the general idea of the unit and to get some specific vocabulary. In this case, it's not just about animals, it's about horses. Well, we're out of time today. I want to thank my crew. By the way, my crew here in the studio happens to be the exact same crew that was out on the ranch doing the field work. So I want to thank all of them for their excellent help in making this program possible. And when we do our next episode, we will also be featuring horses. So thanks for watching. See you next time on Ramping Up Your English. I'm John Letts.
You've been watching Ramping Up Your English, a support program for intermediate level English language learners. Learn more. Visit our website at letscreate.org. You can also watch or download today's program at archive.org/details/roadtv. Join us next time on RBTV Voices for Ramping Up Your English.